Well, we looked at on Sunday one of our final topics that is really a challenging topic. All these topics were very challenging and very um, interesting to look at in Scripture, to really catch God's heart in them and see how He teaches on them. Takes a lot of humility when we tackle these subjects because we all have our personal feelings, so to say, on a number of these things. And sometimes I think the directives that God gives are create tensions in our hearts because it's not the way we would normally lean, or we think differently, or it feels unsettled a bit, and that makes sense. I mean, you read a passage like "love your enemies" and "turn the other cheek." I mean, if that doesn't create a little tension in your heart with regard to what would I normally do, then I don't know. It seems like you're not really catching what he means and how he means it. So on this subject on Sunday we looked at marriage and the marriage covenant, what God says about marriage, and really how our culture sees marriage. And so we talked about that passage in Matthew 19. And if I'd have had just a few more minutes, one of the things that you get into in Matthew 19, which we really didn't touch, are the circumstances by which one would break that covenant. What Scripture calls, what we all call divorce. So what does that look like, and what are the circumstances under which you would go through that? And that's a very tender, a hard, a challenging subject in Scripture because it's hard and challenging in life. And so I wanted to share this one passage where, again, Paul is encouraging now the church at Corinth to, if they can, do what they need to do to stay with a spouse. So in Corinth, like, people were coming to know Christ. Christ is being preached, and you take two who aren't believers, and one of the two would become a believer. So the husband becomes a believer and the wife doesn't, or the wife becomes a believer and the husband doesn't. And now they're confused. Should we just get divorced? Should we stay together? What do we do now? Because we know marriage is supposed to be, we're supposed to share Christ together. But that's not always the circumstances where we find ourselves. And he counsels them like this. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 7. A great passage to slowly read, think through, pray through, and just read it again and find God's heart in the midst of this. So he counsels them in this scenario. This comes from 1 Corinthians 7, and I'll start reading at verse 12. And to the rest I say, now he's talking about a number of things, but he gets into this topic. If any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him. For the unbelieving husband is made holy or set apart, right? That's that word. It doesn't say he's saved. It doesn't mean he's a believer in Jesus Christ. He's set apart because of the spouse and because of what he goes to is their children. For the unbelieving husband is made holy because of his wife, and the unbelieving wife is made holy, set apart, because of her husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy, right? They are set apart. God calls us to different things. So he's counseling them. Listen, if you're married to an unbeliever and that unbeliever is willing to stay married to you, doesn't want out, then Paul's counseling them, stay in. How do you know, he goes on to say later, that you might be the salvation of your husband. You might be the salvation of your wife. Now, so he's counseling them, again, even in scenarios where they're not both believers, to do what you can to hang on to the covenant. Now, for the sake of the other person, and as a result, too, for the sake of the children. So now this is a good text, a challenging text, and it's one where the other's saying, I don't want out. I want to stay in here. So there is a sense of harmony here and not crazy tension and turmoil and things like that. So, but it is one more point in Scripture where God is counseling us to think deeply and move slow in humility to see what it is that we can do to hang on to the marriage covenant. Again, as I said on Sunday, I think what you see in Scripture is God's heart that this was to last a lifetime. and to move in such a way that you can work to make it last and to make it good. Again, but these are hard and challenging subjects, and ones that call for great humility. So that kind of wraps up our thoughts, and I wanted to spend just a minute or two on that and encourage you and challenge you, go back and read that text, and I think God may speak to some of us on that one and help us and give us good counsel that way.